Welcome to the Giving Voice to Addiction podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, where each week real people share real stories of recovery. I'm Terry McGuire.
And I'm Caroline Beidler. Addiction is more than statistics. It's personal. When we share our stories of recovery, we can inspire hope. So take a deep breath, settle in, and listen as Robert gives voice to addiction.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome, Terry. It's great to be here.
We have talked about, because it's one of my favorite quotes, the idea that the same man can't step in the same river twice because it's not the same river and he's not the same man, even in that little bit of time. So under that framework, I was hoping for you to tell us a little bit about who Robert was, when he stepped into the river pre-addiction, before, alcohol became problematic in your life.
Yeah, I love that quote. It's really thought-provoking in a lot of different ways. So I'm glad we're kind of starting at that point. I didn't start drinking until I was 21 years old. It was interesting. I remember the first time I took a drink and went, oh, this is what I needed. It was a brandy Manhattan. I'd never had one before. And now that I look back at it, what it did is it calmed the anxiety in my mind. I grew up in a very anxious household where there was a lot of worry and a lot of concern over things that really didn't matter. And as I started to grow older and take on more responsibility, those anxious thoughts really started to develop in my mind. And as I started to drink, at least in my mind, I thought it was taking those anxious thoughts and things away and helping me relax. When in fact, looking back, it certainly didn't do that. But it started a pattern. And so my drinking continued. Married, had 2 children, very much a closet kind of a drinker, drank at home, drank beers, didn't go out and drink, was not a bar drinker. But as times went on, that drinking progressed to more and more.
Did that, this is what I need, stay?
It did for a while. And I can't tell you when that, this is when I need feeling became, I have to have this to survive. And I think, I can't pinpoint the day or the time, but I can remember waking up one day going, this is going to be a problem. It was just knowing that all of a sudden I had a dependency on alcohol. And that my body, if I didn't drink at the end of the day, I felt it. It became a crutch for me. So it became something that I knew was going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. But by that point in time, it had overtaken me so much that I didn't know how to stop. I tried to cut back, and that worked sometimes. But, I always came back to, the end of the day with a handful of beers or cocktails or whatever it was.
This is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
What was the time frame between that and, this is a problem and I need to do something now?
Probably 6 years, 7 years.
And what happened then?
I went through divorce, which was very hard. That certainly didn't help in my drinking career.
Yeah.
I moved. I was in a new city alone, found myself isolating more at the end of the day, drinking. I was lonesome. I missed my family, wasn't sure I'd made the right choice. There were a lot of things that led into that. And I didn't think my work had suffered, but it did. And one day, the person I worked for asked me to come into his office and said, Bob, we think you have a drinking problem. We want to support you. We want to help you in any way we can, but you need to go get some help and you need to get sober and clean before you come back to work.
Did you receive that?
I received it because I knew he was right. I didn't fight. I didn't fight. And it was humbling to hear him say that to me. But at some level, there was relief in the fact that, okay, now it's okay. I can go get help. And I didn't have to ask for it myself. And I don't know if it was pride. I don't know what it was. But there was something there that stopped me, even though I knew I needed it. It took the intervention of somebody else who cared about me to step in.
So it sounds like that felt less to you like a mandate. And this is what you have to do if you want to keep your job, and almost like permission.
Yeah, it was permission.
Huh.
It was a very, when I look back at it now, it was very much a permissive moment, because when I was drinking, I was worried I was going to lose my job, but couldn't stop. So I think having someone else open the door and say, here's some help, I think you need it, and coming from somebody that I respected, it was what really allowed me to go forward and do that. I remember coming home that afternoon after work and calling Alcoholics Anonymous and saying, I don't feel good. I'm shaking. What do I do to stop drinking? What can I do? And their answer was, you need to start coming to AA. And I didn't like that answer because I wanted a pill, or I wanted something in the moment to just take that away. And later on that evening, I had a seizure and ended up in the hospital. And from there, I went to a treatment facility at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester for 28 days.
Did you continue the path of recovery?
I did. Well, I did. I'll come to a relapse again.
Okay.
But I did. And I started going to AA very regularly. The program was really, really helpful. And it really helped me understand that I was born with this disease called alcoholism. I chose to drink for a lot of reasons, thinking it would help some underlying causes, and it really didn't. And so I stayed sober and continued to go to AA for probably 12 years.
What did AA provide you?
A community, a safe space to share my story, to not feel judged, to be with people who understood where I was in my recovery process, where I'd been, what I'd hoped to do, and being with people also that had been in recovery for years and years and years gave me hope that if they can do it, I can do it as well too. So there were a lot of nuggets there that I was able to grab a hold of that really made a difference. And one of the other interesting things too that came out of that was my parents lived in a very small town. My mom was a nurse. She was a very proud mom, and I think it was hard for her to accept the fact that her son was an alcoholic. She was very supportive. My dad, on the other hand, he started going to Al-Anon as a way to support me. There was some alcoholism in his family, actually in my mother's family as well too. But it really was a great way for us to connect and communicate and commune on what I was going through, which meant the world to me.
Yes. Tell me more. I think that is a real gift, and maybe a rarity that people's families, especially in what was an earlier time, even more stigmatized time, were there for you in that way. It's beautiful.
Yeah, he really was. And not that my mom wasn't either, but he took that extra step. And I think it also helped him. I think his dad, my grandfather, had some issues as well too that were never talked about. And we ended up having a lot of conversations about it. And I remember sitting down with he and my two aunts, his two sisters. And, finally, instead of saying, all those bottles of brandy we found in the garage when Grandpa died, we cleaned him out. He had a sick stomach. It was, Grandpa had an alcohol problem. So it was finally a breakthrough in terms of the family dynamic about being able to talk about it in a much more open way.
And yet, recovery is not a straight line from.
No.
So you said there was a relapse, at least one involved.
Yep. It was a bad relapse, and I did a really stupid thing. I was in the hospital for about 5 days and thought, I'm done. I can go home now. I checked out against medical advice, headed to the liquor store, bought a bottle of vodka, and tried to go back to where we were living. The locks had been changed, and the next thing I knew, the sheriff's department was at the tail end of my car, and they pulled me over for an OWI. I spent a night in jail and ended up in treatment for 59 days. That 59 days was followed up by 90 days in a halfway house, three-quarter house where I could go to work. And I needed all that time. I needed all that time to be safe, to be in a surrounding where there was no alcohol. Sure, I could have jumped in the car and walked down the block, literally, if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. The 3-quarter house that I stayed in, I called it 3 quarters because you could come and go, was probably the most humbling, but yet most incredible experience in my life. Because when you talk about being with others who are like you at AA, this was in a living situation. And I also, during that period of time, I don't remember how many AA meetings I went to in a row. It was over 130 in a row daily. And I found a really good support group, found a great men's group to go to. That the meeting was 120 or 150 men in the community I live in. I didn't want to believe that I needed all of that. I didn't want to believe that. But once I was in the middle of it and I found myself getting better and getting better, I knew that I did.
What does feeling better feel like?
Not feeling that dependency on alcohol, being able to attack the anxieties that I had without alcohol, learning to deal, this is a cliche term, but life on life's terms. Because we always can't predict what's going to happen. That was part of my issue. I wanted to control all those things. And if something bad was happening, I wanted to be able to find a way not to face the badness. And alcohol was my way to do that. So those early months in recovery were really key for me to be able to walk in shoes that faced the realities of life without alcohol, trying to numb it down or dumb it down and find a way to live without it.
Separate from 12 steps, separate from all the other things you were doing, how specifically did getting treatment help you in your recovery journey?
The treatment program touched on a lot of different aspects of recovery. It wasn't just, hey, let's stop drinking. It was tools to help you stop drinking. It was ways to help break down this feeling of despair that I had. And it also introduced back into my life some of the joys that I really had let go of because I was actively drinking. And so there was encouragement across all facets of my life. Little by little, you chisel away at one and, wow, that feels really good. I can do that now without drinking. And you're doing it in a safe environment. You're with people who are in a very similar situation. Their stories are different, but they're there for treatment. They're there to get better. And you have a safe environment to talk with people about, and different counselors as well, with different styles, different approaches, different ways to look at life, taking their stories, the stories they've heard from others, as well as really working hard on the 12-step program and Alcoholics Anonymous during the treatment program. And that really made a difference for me. It did.
So if I am actively in a substance use disorder with alcohol, watching or listening to this, I might hear it and think, oh, there's hope. Look at Robert. He looks healthy. He looks happy. He looks solid. I might also think that's a lot of work. And is that discouraging to know up front? It might take a lot of work.
I've had to take a couple swings at doing this, right? And it is work. And when you're in the middle of it, and I think it's probably whether you're in the middle of anything that's difficult, right? When I look back at those days, they were hard, but it's given me a chance to live a life now that I had really dreamt of back when I was free drinking days. And those days of work, yeah, there's things that stand out in my mind, but a lot of that work now isn't painful to go back and recall, because I look at it as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to develop, and an opportunity to live a life without being dependent upon alcohol or anything else.
So we talked about the river and the Robert who stepped into it before all of that happened. Who's the Robert stepping into the river now? Who are we talking to?
Someone that still goes to therapy, someone who still thinks daily about the fact that I'm an alcoholic. It will never leave me. It's part of my DNA. So it's a whole different life of feeling proud of myself, feeling proud of the fact that, yeah, even though I had to go through treatment a couple of times and recovery never ends, but it's made a difference. And I've had the opportunity to do things since that time across the river that I never dreamt I'd have to do. But there were always things that I wanted to do, in doing things that only have been made possible by being in recovery and being sober. So do I still struggle? I don't struggle with alcoholism as much anymore. I'm not tempted by it. I think part of that is because I've worked really hard at it. And I've also seen the destruction finally that it brought to my life and to the other people that were around me. So I'm very grateful for that. I still struggle with some anxiety and depression. I see an incredible therapist who has helped me with cognitive behavioral therapy that's helped me with that anxiety that drove me to drinking. So that has helped me find, a way to deal with the issue that first kind of brought me to alcohol and deal with it in a different way, in a healthier way.
Talking to people who might be watching or listening, and there's sort of two groups. There's the people who are in addiction thinking, what is it? I don't deserve to get better. I can't get better. It's too much work to get better. And then also the family members, the loved ones, the partners, perhaps the employers who are saying, there's this person in my life who I know has a problem, but for whatever reason, he, she, they are not addressing it the way that I think it needs to be. Yeah. Can you share some of what you've learned? We can't say this is how you do it because everybody's journey is different, but
right. I can only comment on my own. It's so important for people to understand, especially family members and others who are trying to support someone who's trying to get clean, trying to get sober. They understand that it's a process. It works and recovery is possible. It's not easy, and it's not easy, I would imagine, as a person who's trying to support someone in active recovery, that it's easy to see the light, but it does exist. And I think the idea that when you're in active drinking, it's hard to see that your life can be better again, and exponentially better, not just back to where it was, but better in so many ways. I believe that's true to this day for me. And so from that perspective, I think the recovering community is one of the greatest sources of hope and education on what's possible, because you're actually talking to people that have gone through it. And I think that's really important. Their stories are real. Their lives are real. They continue to make a difference in their families' lives, their own lives, and then the recovering community as well.
And when you talk about admiring somebody, one of the things I most admire about you is your commitment to yourself, which translates and sometimes is what's shown by your willingness to knock on somebody's door. You have taught me to say, I'm struggling and I need to talk.
It hasn't come as easily, but it finally made it to me to be able to do that. And I think the proudest moment of my life was actually a year ago when I was struggling with anxiety and depression. And I was seeing my therapist. She knew, I knew it was getting hard. And one Tuesday morning, I woke up and went, I have to go get help. I didn't drink. I didn't do anything else to harm myself. I checked myself into the hospital and said, I'm really struggling. And that to me was pivotal, because all the pain and lessons that I had gone through sunk in. And I was able to go get help and get a med adjustment, but I didn't drink. Yeah. I didn't do anything other than help myself. And so that to me was really important for my recovery still, to know that asking for help does work. And you surround yourself with a community of people who understand you. You have to be pretty transparent to make it work. But finding those people that care about you and love you, that you can be transparent with, makes all the difference in the world. So that episode a year ago, was it hard the first couple of days? Yeah, it was. My family understood. I spent some time with my daughter and moved in there for 10 days, which was great because I live alone. And it was wonderful to be a part of her life and get some outpatient therapy for a couple of weeks. And so those tune-ups are something that, I'm not opposed to having to do. If I have to do it again in my life, I'm going to do it, because I don't see it as a failure or a weakness. I see it as I recognized the problem before it got really bad and did something, and I wasn't ashamed about it. And that has stuck with me in a really big way this past year. So
Thanks for leading by example.
thanks for having me.
Terry, when I listen to Robert's story, I am just so struck by his resilience and the way that he has moved forward in his journey, even after some relapses, or as people like to talk about now, recurrence of use. I was afraid to talk about my own experience of recurrence of use because I didn't want other people to feel like it had to be a part of their journey. And it doesn't. I mean, you don't have to go back to substance use, but the research does show that having a recurrence of use or multiple recurrences can be a part of the journey, but it doesn't mean that your journey's over. And I think that Robert really showed that when he talked about his story, because he experienced going to treatment and then having a recurrence of use and then going back and then trying a different pathway through 12-step fellowship. I loved when he talked about recovery housing and how he could find sober living that worked for him and how transformational that was for his journey. So there are so many options and avenues for us as we are going along our recovery journeys. And I think his story is just so inspirational.
And his willingness to share his story in our studio on camera, which is a real step in his recovery journey, to saying, I am loud and proud. I have zero shame about this, and I want to help other people.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love recovery stories. And when we are able to share those stories, walking out of kind of the shadows and the shame of our experience of addiction, something so profound and amazing happens, not in our own personal recovery journey, not just there, certainly yes, but for other people seeing those and hearing those stories. And I like to point back to the research. I love the evidence-based, stuff out there. The research does show that the more we share our stories, stigma is decreased. And the more that stigma is decreased, more people feel like it's okay to ask for help. We're not the only ones struggling. And when we see our own stories of addiction reflected back to us in someone else's story, it's amazing.
And I love that when he talked about the more recent challenge he had with his mental health, how he got right on it. He went right into getting treatment for that so that he could continue on his healthier journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've heard people talk about that as we go along our journey in recovery, we get tools that we can put in our toolbox. And so Robert had the tools that he had already learned, reaching out, getting support, finding the treatment that worked for him. So when he had other challenges come into his life, he knew what to do. Yeah. He already had the tools. So, there's going to be hardships in life. There's going to be challenges even after we find a recovery pathway, but we have the tools today to be able to navigate those challenging times.
Excellent. So thank you, Robert, for sharing a bit of your recovery journey with us. And thank you, Caroline, for your comments.
You're very welcome. And, folks can go to Recovery.com for additional resources. You can learn how to find the treatment options that work for you and your unique journey.
See you next week.